The price of oil has sunk to a new record low, down over 300%. That's minus $39 a barrel, sub-zero in New York. This has happened in spite of OPEC's decision to slash production by 10%. Stocks of all energy-related firms are falling in the biggest one-day oil price drop in history. Germany reopens some shops and specialist businesses, even as the number of cases of COVID-19 and deaths from it continue to rise. Hotels, restaurants, cafes and sports facilities are all set to remain closed. A unity government in Israel, Netanyahu and Gantz agreeing to rotate the leadership. Faced with the COVID-19 crisis and after 3 inconclusive elections within 12 months, they've now decided to bury the political hatchet. Thank you very much for being with us. The COVID-19 pandemic has claimed perhaps its most unexpected victim. Amid all the human suffering, I'm going to have more on that in a moment, there's been an historic fall in the price of oil. A barrel is now in minus figures, a record 300% fall in the price in New York. Brent crude has showed a similar drop. Let's take a look at our report.
With much of the world under stay-at-home orders because of the coronavirus, demand for oil has dried up. Now, storage facilities are almost filled to the brim. There are concerns the world could run out of places to store the excess supply. Those worries plunging the benchmark for U.S. oil, West Texas Intermediate. Earlier this month, OPEC Plus, a group that includes OPEC members and others such as Russia and Mexico, agreed to cut output by almost 10 million barrels per day, or about 10%, for the next 2 months. It's the largest cut ever agreed to, but some say it isn't enough. One analyst saying it hasn't taken long for the market to recognize that the OPEC Plus deal will not, in its present form, be enough to balance oil markets. There is mounting concern the U.S. will actually run out of storage capacity. Buyers in Texas have offered as little as $2 a barrel for some oil streams, raising the possibility of negative prices, with producers paying to have crude taken off their hands.
Well, our business editor Kate Moody joined us a little earlier. She told us more about why this historic fall in the oil price has happened now.
We've seen a lot of big market moves in recent weeks, but never before have we seen negative oil prices like this. Basically, what these numbers mean is that it costs far more to store oil right now than it does to buy it, and it's a sign of just how little demand there really is. Now, there is a technical element at play. It gets a bit complicated, but it means but what it's about is that oil prices tend to trade in futures. The futures contract for May expires on Tuesday, and that's added a lot of pressure because people who hold those contracts, it means they have to actually take delivery of the oil when they expire. So the price that dropped into negative is that oil price for the oil that has to be delivered in May. If you look further ahead, oil that's set to be delivered in June, for example, was still trading at around $20 per barrel. There isn't usually this big a gap between oil futures for this month and for those later down the line. Investors are betting, though, that the coronavirus pandemic will be brought under control in the coming months, and that demand will then rebound. The negative numbers, analysts say, are a bit of a fluke here. They say prices further down the line are probably a more accurate reflection of what's really going on. More broadly, though, we know that there is just too much oil and not enough place to put it. Factories have slowed their output, travel has ground all but to a halt, and stockpiles, especially in the U.S., are really reaching their capacity. And that's why U.S. WTI prices have reacted so much more than the international benchmark there.
Kate Moody, our business editor, on the record historic fall in the price of oil, down to minus figures on all markets. And of course, we'll keep across all developments on that for you. Let's now bring you the latest on the human cost of the coronavirus pandemic. The death toll here in France is now over 20,000. Over 5,500 people are in intensive care. Hotels are starting to take people in who are suffering from COVID-19 to help with the isolation process. The Chief Health Officer, Jérôme Salomon, spoke of a small decrease in new cases, but as for the number now dead, he described that as a painful moment. The lockdown in Germany has been relaxed. Small shops and specialist businesses have reopened. This takes place even as the number of cases of COVID-19 and deaths from it continue to rise. Hotels, restaurants, cafes and sports facilities are set to remain closed. Germany has a death toll of 4,700. That's far less than the other major states of the EU and Britain. Let's hear from Chancellor Angela Merkel.
We must not lose sight of the fact that despite everything, we're at the very beginning of the pandemic. That we're at the beginning and not out of the woods yet.
Frau Merkel speaking a little earlier, so for small business owners this reopening is a relief. But there are still overall restrictions to ensure the coronavirus is kept under control across Germany.
It's a gradual easing of restrictions, not a return to business as usual. But for German shop owners like Katja Beer, it comes as a relief.
Es war ein Glücksgefühl, ein absolutes Glücksgefühl, so ein Gänsehaut-Feeling, was ich jetzt auch gerade habe.
From this Monday, the majority of shops, smaller than 800 square meters in Germany, are again allowed to welcome customers. There's still a ban on gatherings of more than 2 people in public, and a requirement to stand more than 1.5 meters apart in public areas. So Katja has thought of some workarounds, keeping customers and staff at a safe distance.
Wenn der Kunde jetzt etwas probiert, dann müssen wir ihm natürlich auch die Ware anreichen. Ich habe jetzt hier ein wunderschönes Sweatshirt, der Kunde möchte das probieren. Und ich fahre einfach die Stange hinein und der Kunde kann sich die Ware nehmen, probieren und mir genauso wieder hinhängen. Ich nehme sie zurück.
Ich finde es okay. Also wie gesagt, es muss halt so ein bisschen, ich weiß nicht, ob es so bleibt. Ich habe Bedenken, dass die Leute sich doch wieder zusammensetzen draußen und also mal gucken.
Germany's 16 states are lifting restrictions at a different pace. In some areas, including the capital Berlin, reopening will take a little longer. Meanwhile, hairdressers, cultural venues, bars, leisure centres and beauty salons will all stay closed for the time being. And large-scale public events like concerts and football matches have been banned until at least August 31st.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is allowing the COVID-19 lockdown in India to be eased. However, it comes as India records the biggest one-day spike yet of cases and COVID-19 deaths. Here at France 24, Julia Kim has more.
Partially lifting the world's largest lockdown. Faced with a hemorrhaging economy, the Prime Minister has relaxed India's stay-at-home order, but only for workers in certain industries, like agriculture, construction and manufacturing. Employers must also ensure strict hygiene and social distancing for workers to prevent potential infection.
मान के चलो कि मान के सीजन चल रहा है हमारा और एक दूसरे से मान लो लॉकडाउन खोल भी दिया तो एक दूसरे बीमारी फैल जाती है किसानों को काम इसलिए खोला जा रहा है कि अगर किसान इस काम को नहीं करेगा तो पब्लिक खाएगी क्या.
But returning to business as usual has proven complicated. Transport disruption has hurt supply chains and foiled workers' attempts to get to work. With the lockdown extended to at least the 3rd of May, lack of demand has provided little incentive. Others say they simply can't guarantee the stringent new workplace safety requirements. But on that point, officials have made it clear that no compromise can be made.
जरूरी है कि हम सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग के नॉर्म्स का पूर्णतः पालन करें ताकि जो कोविड के केसेस कुछ जिलों में कुछ राज्यों में कम हो रहे हैं वे और भी कम हों और जो जिले ग्रीन जोन में चले गए हैं वहां पर हम सबकी रिस्पांसिबिलिटी है कि वह जीरो केस की स्थिति में ही बने रहें.
India has congratulated itself on having far fewer deaths and infections per capita than other richer countries. But its lack of testing has health experts believing that the situation is actually far worse. Not all states and territories have relaxed their lockdowns. New Delhi has chosen to stay shut, fearing further infections.
The situation in India. Well, in an effort to stop the spread of COVID-19, Ethiopia declared a state of emergency on the 8th of April. But the emergency hasn't prevented Ethiopians from celebrating the Orthodox Easter. Our reporter Maria Gerth Nicolescu sent this from Addis Ababa.
These residents of Addis Ababa are traveling to their families outside of the capital for the Easter weekend. With the state of emergency, buses have to stay half empty, so prices have doubled. Despite long waiting lines and the risk of contracting COVID-19, they are determined to leave the city. Social distancing is impossible to implement. Some travelers changed their minds to avoid taking any risks. In other parts of the city, life goes on at a slow pace. Cafes are still running, but some shops have closed. For many, the pandemic justifies the state of emergency, but this member of the opposition party says he's worried about the election delay. The current government will have no constitutional legitimacy once the emergency measure is lifted.
Opposition and the government has come to agreement to form a kind of national transitional government until a proper time is set for the election. We worry that the government may use this state of emergency to limit the movement of the opposition forces.
But according to this analyst, the election delay could prove positive and even calm political tensions across the country.
That gives the parties more time. It gives the electoral board more time to prepare. It gives the political actors opportunity to negotiate over issues like what are the conditions for a fair election and how to achieve them.
It's impossible to know whether Abiy Ahmed's government will manage to avoid a political crisis after the COVID-19 pandemic. But for now, all parties seem to agree that efforts to contain the virus remain a top priority.
Human Rights Watch says soldiers in Burkina Faso executed 31 unarmed detainees earlier this month during operations against Islamist militants. The bodies of the men from the Fulani ethnic group were found in the town of Djibo on April the 9th, shortly after their arrest. Human Rights Watch says it has 17 eyewitnesses. The Burkinabe Defence Ministry has said it's ordered an investigation on April the 10th. A spokesperson said the killers will be sanctioned if the allegations prove to be true. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. Canada is still coming to terms with the biggest mass killing in its history. A man thought to have been dressed as a policeman gunned down 18 people during a 12-hour manhunt. The 51-year-old gunman, unknown to the police, was in the end shot dead by an officer. Correspondent Laura McQuillan has more from Canada.
The latest from police is he left no note. So they are searching for a motive right now. But one detail that might be factored into all of that is the fact that he appeared to be wearing a police uniform and had customised a car to look like a police car. So that made it easier for him to be driving around committing these crimes. But as for why he went to that effort, that's still unclear. So police will be picking through his phone, his computer, his social media if he had it, talking to anyone who knew him to try and piece together what could have motivated this. Because the other detail we know from police is that while he knew some of the victims, others appeared to have been chosen at random. And as for what may have started all of this, still at this point, very unclear.
Laura McQuillan, who spoke to us earlier from Canada. There's a new unity government in Israel. Rivals Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz have agreed this emergency measure. Leadership will be apparently rotated. It ends a year of political stalemate and enables them to focus on the growing COVID-19 crisis.
It took a crisis as severe as the coronavirus pandemic to break Israel's year-long political deadlock. After weeks of talks, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his rival Benny Gantz have agreed to form an emergency unity government. The agreement calls for a 3-year period, with Netanyahu serving as prime minister for the first half and Gantz taking the job the second half. A political maneuver extending Netanyahu's rule as Israel's longest-serving premier and allowing him to remain in office as he faces trial on corruption charges. In a tweet, Netanyahu said the national emergency government would work to save the lives and livelihoods of Israeli citizens. But before it was even confirmed, the unity government had already sown division. Supporters of Gantz and his centrist Blue and White Party have protested against the deal, with many seeing it as an about-face. Over the past year, with its 3 inconclusive elections, Gantz repeatedly vowed he would never serve under an indicted premier. Now, the coronavirus has changed his tune. On Twitter, he justified his decision to join forces with the conservative Netanyahu, saying it will prevent a 4th election and preserve democracy. The emergency government was formed to steer Israel through the coronavirus pandemic. So far, the country has reported more than 13,000 cases and nearly 200 deaths.
For more world news, stay with us. You're watching France 24.